Imagine you're in a corporate Zoom meeting. It's April of 2020. The world is paralyzed by the pandemic, and as you review the quarterly figures from the safety of your living room, you recognize a face on the screen. A face you'd swear you saw on a missing poster 25 years ago. This isn't just any face, it's the face of a boy who vanished without a trace on June 12, 1995, whose yellowed photo you've seen hundreds of times, taped to telephone poles in supermarkets and on the walls of police stations across the country. This is the true story of Marcus Henderson and his employee, Daniel Torres, though that wasn't the name he was born with. What was eventually uncovered was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. For 25 years to the day, a family mourned the loss of their son, while he lived just 526 miles away under a completely fabricated identity. The supposed safety of working from home, that new normal which promised protection from the invisible virus lurking outside, became the very stage where one of the most disturbing tragedies in the history of American missing children cases would be unveiled. A video call with meeting ID 7082416966023, scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. on April 14th, 2020, would forever change the lives of two families and unravel a web of lies spun over a quarter of a century. What Marcus Henderson saw on his screen that Tuesday was not just an employee joining another tedious virtual meeting. It was the ghost of a boy the world had given up for dead, now breathing, talking about sales projections, completely unaware that the life he knew, a life built on lies, was about to collapse. Christopher Michael Brennan was precisely 9 years and 4 months old when he disappeared. He wasn't just another statistic. He was a boy with freckles on his nose who dreamed of being an astronaut, who collected baseball cards and who begged his mother Sara to read him just one more chapter of The Hobbit each night before bed. On that day, June 12, 1995, Christopher was wearing his favorite blue and white striped Gap Kids t-shirt, the same one his grandmother Martha had given him for his last birthday. He wore a pair of Levi's denim shorts, worn thin at the knees from countless hours playing in the park, and his red Nike Air Max sneakers that seemed to glow when he ran. The Brennan family wasn't rich, but they weren't poor either. Michael Brennan worked double shifts as an electrician at the General Motors plant in Lansing, Michigan. Sara was a second-grade teacher at Willow Creek Elementary, the same school where Christopher was in the 4th grade. They had lost their younger daughter, Emily, to leukemia 3 years earlier. Christopher was their only surviving child, their reason for getting up each morning, the glue that held together a marriage fractured by grief. The last message Christopher left was a note, scrawled in green crayon on the refrigerator. "Mom, I'm going to Tommy's house after school. I promise to be back for dinner. I love you." Tommy Peterson, his best friend since kindergarten, would later confirm that Christopher never made it to his house that day. The last photograph ever taken of Christopher was during morning recess at 10:47 a.m., captured accidentally in the background of a chess club group photo. In it, he can be seen smiling as he plays with his red Duncan yo-yo, the same one that would be found abandoned 72 hours later in an alley 3 blocks from the school. Christopher had a distinctive crescent-shaped birthmark on his left cheek and a small scar above his right eyebrow, the result of a fall from his blue Huffy bicycle when he was 7. He was missing a bottom front tooth, normal for his age, and had a nervous habit of biting his nails when he was anxious. His teachers described him as a bright but shy boy who preferred to read during recess rather than play soccer with the other kids. The night before he disappeared, Christopher had eaten his favorite meal, Kraft macaroni and cheese with chicken nuggets. Sara would forever remember how her son had been unusually affectionate that night, hugging her 3 times before going to bed and telling her, "You're the best mom in the world." Michael had gotten home late from work but managed to say goodnight to his son, who asked him to promise to take him fishing the next weekend at Lake Huron. "I promise, champ," were the last words Michael would ever say to his son. The Brennans lived in a modest two-story house at 1847 Maple Street, with a front garden where Christopher had planted sunflowers the summer before. His room, painted sky blue with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, would remain untouched for the next 25 years. A shrine frozen in time. His Power Rangers backpack, his Ninja Turtles action figures, his collection of 237 baseball cards carefully organized in binders, all waiting for the return of a boy who would never come home again. June 12, 1995 dawned with a temperature of 78 degrees Fahrenheit in Lansing, Michigan. At 6:23 a.m., Christopher's Mickey Mouse alarm clock went off, just like every other school day. Sara Brennan entered his room at 6:31 a.m. to make sure he was awake. Christopher got up at 6:35 a.m., showered for exactly 7 minutes, and came down for breakfast at 6:52 a.m. He ate a bowl of Lucky Charms with 2% milk and drank a glass of Tropicana orange juice. At 7:18 a.m., Michael Brennan said goodbye to his family. He kissed Sara on the cheek and ruffled Christopher's hair. "Be good, champ," he said, grabbing his blue Coleman lunchbox. Christopher replied, "I'm always good, Dad." Michael would leave the house at 7:21 a.m., never knowing it was the last time he would see his son in their home. At 7:45 a.m., Christopher and his mother left the house. The air smelled of gasoline from the school bus, number 47, that passed down their street, mingled with the sweet scent of lilacs from Mrs. Henderson's garden next door. They heard the metallic rattle of a passing green Schwinn bicycle ridden by Billy Matthews, the 14-year-old paperboy. Sara drove their beige 1993 Honda Civic the 2.3 miles to Willow Creek Elementary, arriving at 7:54 a.m. At 7:56 a.m., Christopher got out of the car at the school's main entrance. Sara noticed he had forgotten his science project, a diorama of the solar system made from painted styrofoam balls. "Don't worry, sweetie. I'll bring it by during recess," she promised. Christopher smiled, showing the gap from his missing tooth, and ran toward the building. It was the last time Sara would see her son as Christopher Brennan. Classes proceeded normally. Mrs. Patricia Williams, his fourth-grade teacher, reported that Christopher participated in math class at 8:45 a.m., correctly answering that 7 times 8 was 56. During the 10:30 a.m. recess, he played marbles with Tommy Peterson and Jeremy Clark near the rusty swings in the back playground. He ate lunch at 12:15 p.m. in the cafeteria, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich his mother had packed, a Granny Smith apple, and a box of grape high C juice. At 2:47 p.m., the dismissal bell rang. Christopher was last seen by the school's analog security camera at 2:51 p.m., walking alone toward the east exit of the building. The grainy VHS tape would later show a blurry figure approaching him at 2:52 p.m. At 2:53 p.m., both figures disappear from the only functioning camera's field of view. Tommy Peterson waited for Christopher at his house, from 3:05 p.m. until 3:45 p.m. When he didn't show, he assumed he'd changed his plans. He didn't call the Brennans because his family couldn't afford a landline. This 40-minute delay would prove crucial. At 3:15 p.m., a dark blue Chevrolet Astro van with a partially visible license plate, MI-47X, was seen by 67-year-old Margaret Cooper, parked irregularly at the corner of Oak Street and 3rd Avenue, just 2 blocks from the school. She would specifically recall that the driver, a man about 35 to 40 years old wearing a red baseball cap, seemed to be waiting for someone. "He kept looking toward the school," she would later testify. At 4:30 p.m., Sara Brennan started to worry. Christopher was always home by 4 o'clock p.m. She called the Petersons' house from the school phone. Tommy's mother informed her that Christopher had never arrived. Panic set in at 4:37 p.m. when Sara called Michael at work. "Something's wrong," were her first words. At 5:15 p.m., after driving through the neighborhood searching for Christopher, the Brennans called 911. Officer Dennis Mitchell arrived at their home at 5:43 p.m. Because Christopher was only 9, an alert was immediately activated. In 1995, however, this mostly meant phone calls to local stations and faxes to neighboring departments. At 6:22 p.m., Christopher's red Duncan yo-yo was found by a homeless man named Carl Red Thompson in the alley behind Murphy's liquor store. He wouldn't report it for another 3 days until he saw the missing flyers and recognized the toy described. At 7:07 p.m., as the sun began to set, staining the sky a burnt orange, 47 volunteers were already searching within a 2-mile radius of the school. Police dogs arrived at 8:14 p.m., but an unexpected rain that began at 8:47 p.m. would wash away any useful scent trail. The exact moment Christopher trusted the wrong person was captured inadvertently in the field journal of amateur ornithologist Harold Finch, who at 2:54 p.m. on June 12th wrote, "Observing northern cardinal, when a boy with a Power Rangers backpack willingly gets into a blue van on Oak and 3rd, the driver gave him something looked like candy or a toy." 2:55 p.m. Van drives away, heading east. Finch wouldn't connect this observation to the disappearance until a week later, when he finally read the backlogged newspaper. By then, the van and its occupants had vanished without a trace, beginning 25 years of deafening silence. The first 48 hours after Christopher Brennan's disappearance brutally exposed the limitations of the 1995 law enforcement system. The Lansing Police Department, led by Chief Robert Lawson, had only 127 officers for a population of 119,000. Amber Alerts did not exist. They wouldn't be implemented until 1996. There were no instant national databases, and interagency coordination relied on fax machines that frequently jammed. Lead Detective James Kowalski, a 23-year veteran of the force, was assigned the case at 6:45 p.m. On June 12th, his first decision was to expand the search perimeter to 5 miles, mobilizing 89 officers and 200 civilian volunteers. But without GPS or reliable cell communication, coordination was chaotic. Search teams duplicated areas while leaving others completely unchecked. The first false lead arrived on June 13, 1995 at 9:34 a.m. A gas station attendant, Roger Williams, swore he had seen Christopher with a man in a red Ford F-150 pickup. He provided a detailed description: a white male, 45-50 years old, gray beard, eagle tattoo on his right forearm. 17 units pursued this lead for 72 hours, questioning 43 owners of red F-150s in the county. All had solid alibis. Williams later admitted he had been drinking the night before and had mistaken another boy for Christopher. The second false lead was devastating. On June 15, 1995 at 3:22 p.m., Timothy Mason, a janitor at Willow Creek Elementary, was arrested after one of Christopher's baseball cards, a 1989 Ken Griffey Jr. Upper Deck, was found in his locker. Mason, 31, with a prior record for marijuana possession in 1987, became the prime suspect. During 18 hours of interrogation with no lawyer present, still legal in Michigan at the time, Mason maintained his innocence. He explained that Christopher had given him the card a week earlier because Mason had helped him get his basketball off the roof. 3 students confirmed this story on June 17th. Mason was released, but the damage to his reputation was permanent. He moved to Ohio 2 months later. The third false lead nearly destroyed the Brennan family. On June 20th, 1995, an anonymous call at 11:47 p.m. suggested investigating Michael Brennan. The informant, who was never identified, claimed to have seen him acting strangely near Lake Huron the day after the disappearance. The police, desperate for results, subjected Michael to 2 polygraph tests on June 22nd and 24th. The results were inconclusive due to his extreme emotional state. For a week, resources were diverted to investigate the shattered father, checking his finances, interviewing his co-workers, even partially excavating the Brennans' backyard on June 27th. The most critical error of the investigation occurred on June 14th, when Harold Finch's testimony about the blue van was initially dismissed. The rookie officer, Peter Reynolds, who took the statement incorrectly, wrote Oak and 3rd as Oak and 33rd, a non-existent intersection. This typographical error diverted the search 3.7 miles to the west for 5 crucial days. By the time it was corrected on June 19th, any physical evidence at the correct location had been contaminated or removed. The technology of 1995 presented insurmountable obstacles. The only security cameras within a 2-mile radius of the school were analog systems at 3 banks and a liquor store. All of them recorded on 6-hour VHS tapes, which were rewound and reused every 48 hours. By the time police requisitioned them on June 14th, the recordings from the 12th had been taped over. The school's phone system had no caller ID. Highway toll records were kept manually and archived weekly. By the time investigators requested them, many had already been destroyed per standard protocol. The investigation was immediately hobbled by a lack of accessible forensic DNA. In 1995, a single DNA test cost $4,000 and took 6 to 8 weeks to process. The Lansing Police Department's entire annual budget for all forensic testing was a mere $12,000. The few fibers recovered from Christopher's yo-yo were sent to the state lab on June 30th. The results, which arrived on August 22nd, revealed only common synthetic fibers consistent with automotive upholstery, holding no investigative value. Suspects were quickly ruled out. Martin Hayes, released from Jackson State Prison 6 months prior, was at an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, his alibi confirmed by 12 witnesses. Frank Morrison was working at a factory in Detroit, 90 miles away, with confirmed time card records. Leonard Parks had been hospitalized since June 10th with appendicitis. By September 30th, 1995, after 3,847 man-hours of investigation, 1,200 interviews, and $380,000 in resources, the case went cold. Detective Kowalski noted in his final report for the year, "No new viable leads, case remains active but with no dedicated resources assigned." It was the beginning of 25 years of silence. From 1996 to 2019, the absence of Christopher Brennan became a wound that never healed, a void that grew deeper with each passing year. The Brennan family's rituals became ceremonies of grief and desperate hope. Every June 12th, without fail, Sara and Michael would place 12 white candles in Christopher's bedroom window at 2:47 p.m., the exact time he was last seen. The neighbors learned to respect this somber moment, shutting off lawnmowers and radios, creating a communal silence that lasted exactly 9 minutes and 4 seconds, the age he was when he vanished. The first false sighting came on March 8, 2003. A woman named Patricia Hendricks swore she had seen Christopher, now 17 by her calculations, working at a McDonald's in Columbus, Ohio. "He had the birthmark on his left cheek," she insisted. The Brennans drove the 247 miles that same night, arriving at the restaurant at 2:30 a.m. They waited in the parking lot until it opened at 5 a.m. The young man Patricia had seen was Jose Martinez, a 19-year-old Guatemalan immigrant. The mark on his cheek was a burn from cooking oil. Sara wept for the entire drive home. The second sighting on September 15, 2009 was even crueler. A true crime television show featured a computer-generated age progression of Christopher. Within 48 hours, 73 calls came in. One seemed promising. A man in Portland, Oregon who went by Chris Brown with no memory of his childhood before the age of 10. The FBI flew the Brennans to Portland on September 17th. The DNA test took an agonizing 72 hours. Negative. Chris Brown was actually Christopher Patterson, an abandoned child from Kentucky. The disappointment hospitalized Sara with what doctors called stress cardiomyopathy. Literally, a broken heart. The third significant sighting occurred on April 23, 2014. A private detective named Thomas Murphy, hired with the Brennans' $47,000 retirement savings, believed he had found Christopher living as Daniel Thompson in Phoenix, Arizona. This man, 28 according to records, had appeared in the system in 1996 with no prior history. For 3 months, Murphy surveilled him, documenting his life in 1,400 photographs. The resemblance was stunning, but when they finally approached him on August 2, 2014, Daniel Thompson turned out to be a child abuse survivor from Florida who had run away from home at 11. Another dead end. Michael Brennan's decline was gradual but relentless. In 1998, he began to drink. By 2001, he had lost his job at General Motors after 18 years of service. In 2004, he was arrested for driving under the influence. On November 7, 2007, Sara found him in the garage with the car engine running, unconscious but alive. The note he left said simply, "I can't celebrate another empty birthday." He survived, but he was never the same. Sara's mother, Martha Wilson, died on February 3, 2011 without ever knowing what happened to her grandson. Her last coherent words were, "Tell Christopher Grandma is waiting for him." Her death marked a turning point. Michael and Sara, bound only by their shared grief, divorced on August 15, 2012. Michael moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Detroit. Sara remained in the house on Maple Street, unable to leave the last place she had seen her son. The case was officially archived as inactive on June 12, 2005, exactly 10 years after the disappearance. Detective Kowalski, now retired, kept a copy of the file in his basement. Every year on the anniversary, he reviewed it, searching for anything he might have missed. In 2015, he digitized the entire file on his own dime, 3,400 pages of reports, interviews, and dead-end leads. In 2017, Sara created a Facebook page, Finding Christopher Brennan. It amassed 45,000 followers. Each post generated new theories, new false leads. Hope became a form of torture. A psychic in California claimed Christopher was alive but had amnesia. A group of internet detectives wrongly accused a retired teacher in Vermont of being the kidnapper. The man sued and won, costing Sara $15,000 she didn't have. By 2019, Sara, now 67, had developed early-onset Alzheimer's. Her doctors attributed it to chronic stress. Some days she forgot Christopher was gone and would wait for him to come home for dinner. On other days, she relived the loss as if it were new. Michael, sober since 2016, visited her every Sunday, a couple reunited by tragedy and now by illness. On December 31, 2019, as the world celebrated the end of a decade, Sara wrote in her journal with a trembling hand, 25 years next year. Where are you, my baby?" She had no idea the answer was just 526 miles away, living under the name Daniel Torres, working as a data analyst for Henderson Technologies, and about to join a video call that would change everything. Marcus Henderson, founder and CEO of Henderson Technologies, a Cincinnati-based enterprise software company, was not a man given to hunches or superstitions. An MIT graduate with a master's in computer science, he had built his company from the ground up to a valuation of $230 million. On April 14, 2020, at 9:45 a.m., he was preparing his third cup of Blue Mountain coffee in his home study, adjusting to the new reality of remote work imposed by the COVID-19 pandemic. The meeting was scheduled for 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Time. Zoom ID 7882-459-6723. Password Kutos Review 2020. It was a routine quarterly review with his West Coast data analytics team. Daniel Torres, an employee for 3 years, was known for his meticulous attention to detail and a strange reluctance to participate in company social events. A reclusive genius, as the HR director had once described him. At 9:58 a.m., Marcus opened Zoom. He checked his Logitech C920 camera and Blue Yeti microphone. The natural light from the window illuminated his face perfectly, a detail that would prove crucial. At 10 o'clock a.m. sharp, the participants began to join. Jennifer Walsh from San Francisco, Robert Chen from Seattle, Maria Rodriguez from Los Angeles, and Daniel Torres from San Diego. The meeting began with the usual updates on performance metrics and Q3 projections. Daniel was presenting an analysis of customer usage patterns during the first days of the lockdown. At 10:17 a.m., while sharing his screen to display an Excel chart, he leaned toward the camera to point out a specific data point. The light from his window caught the left side of his face perfectly. Marcus felt as if time had stopped. There it was, a crescent-shaped birthmark on the left cheek, partially hidden by 3-day-old stubble. But it wasn't just that. As Daniel raised his hand to scratch his forehead, Marcus saw the scar above his right eyebrow. A distinctive curved scar about 2 centimeters long, exactly like the one he had seen 1,000 times on the missing posters plastered all over Michigan in the mid-90s. Marcus Henderson had grown up in Lansing, Michigan. In 1995, he was 15 years old and lived 6 blocks from the Brennans. He had participated in the initial searches for Christopher. His mother, Eleanor Henderson, had been the neighbor Sara Brennan first ran to when Christopher didn't come home. For years, Christopher's faded poster remained on the bulletin board of the local grocery store where Marcus worked weekends bagging groceries. "Marcus, can you hear me?" Daniel's voice snapped him out of his trance. Marcus had been staring, mute, for 23 seconds according to the Zoom timestamp. Yes, sorry, connection issue," he lied, his mind racing. Was it possible? The age fit. Daniel had said he was 34, which would mean a 1986 birth year. But Christopher would have turned 35 in March 2020. Close enough. For the next 43 minutes of the meeting, Marcus discreetly took 17 screenshots using his MacBook Pro's native function. Every time Daniel moved, Marcus captured a new angle. Once, when Daniel stood up to get some water, Marcus recorded 8 seconds of video capturing his gait, that slight sway he'd noticed before but could never place. At 11:03 a.m., when the meeting ended, Marcus remained in his study paralyzed. He opened Google and searched, "Christopher Brennan missing 1995. The first result was Sara Brennan's Facebook page. The age progression photo, updated in 2019, showed what Christopher might look like at 34. Marcus toggled between the image and his screenshots, his fingers flying across Command Tab. The resemblance was undeniable but not conclusive. The ethical dilemma tormented him. If he was wrong, he could destroy an innocent employee's life and reopen devastating wounds for the Brennan family. If he was right, 1,000 questions followed. Did Daniel know who he really was? Was he a victim or complicit? How had he obtained an entirely new identity? At 2:15 p.m., after 3 hours of internal debate, Marcus made a decision. He called his old MIT roommate, now working at the FBI's cybercrime division. "Kevin, I need your help with something. Off the record for now. I think I just found a kid who's been missing for 25 years." The 21st century investigation into the true identity of Daniel Torres began unofficially on April 15, 2020, at 8:00 a.m. Central Time. Special Agent Kevin Park discreetly accessed the National Crime Information Center, or NCIC, from his secure FBI laptop in Quantico, Virginia. What would have taken weeks of paperwork and interagency coordination in 1995 now took 3.7 seconds of database queries. The first step was facial recognition. Park used the FBI's next-generation identification system, specifically the Interstate Photo System's face search algorithm, version 4.2. Marcus's 17 screenshots, enhanced with ESRGN scaling AI to increase the resolution from 720p to 4K, were run against a database of 640 million images. The process, which would have been science fiction in 1995, returned a result in 47 seconds. A 94.3% probability match to Christopher Michael Brennan. Case file, Ashtar ITMI 1995-06547. But modern technology demanded multiple verifications. Park ran the images through 3 additional systems. Amazon Recognition returned a 92.8% match, Microsoft Azure Face API a 93.1% match, and the FBI's proprietary FaceNet a 95.7% match. The convergence of results was statistically significant, with a probability of error less than 0.01%. An EXIF metadata analysis of Daniel Torres's employee files at Henderson Technologies revealed immediate inconsistencies. His corporate ID photo, supposedly taken in 2017, contained metadata indicating it was created in Photoshop CS6 on March 3, 2017, at 3:47 p.m., with 14 layers of edits. A forensic image scan using an error level analysis algorithm showed significant manipulation around the left ear, possibly to conceal distinguishing features. A database search revealed that Daniel Torres first appeared in official records on September 7, 1996, when he was enrolled in Jefferson Middle School in Phoenix, Arizona, supposedly as a transfer student from Mexico. However, no records of entry into the country, no student visa, and no Mexican birth certificate existed. His Social Security number was issued in Arizona in October 1996, highly unusual for someone supposedly born in 1986. On April 17th, Park discreetly obtained a DNA sample. During a mandatory COVID security update ordered by Henderson Technologies, all remote employees were sent at-home health test kits. Daniel's, after being used, was intercepted and diverted to the FBI DNA laboratory in Quantico. Simultaneously, Sara Brennan, now in a memory care facility in Lansing, provided a saliva sample through her legal guardian, unaware of its true purpose. The DNA analysis using the Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, with 24 low CSTR markers took only 18 hours, a process that would have taken 2 months in 1995. On April 19th, at 4:23 p.m., the results confirmed it. Probability of maternal relationship, 99.9999%. Daniel Torres was Christopher Brennan. The digital financial investigation revealed layers of deception. Daniel's bank accounts showed consistent monthly deposits of $3,000 from a Delaware LLC called Sunset Holdings from 1996 until 2018. Sunset Holdings, traced through the FinCEN database, was linked to 7 other shell companies, all created between 1995 and 1996, all with the same registered agent, a lawyer named Jonathan Marsh, who had conveniently died in a boating accident in 2001. Blockchain analysis, non-existent in 1995, revealed that Daniel had been receiving payments in Bitcoin since 2013, totaling 47.3 BTC, worth over $342,000 in April 2020, from a wallet linked to dark web markets. While not directly criminal, it suggested he knew about his situation and pointed to the possibility of either blackmail or hush money. Historical geolocation pieced together from aggregated data from Google Maps, cell towers, and credit card records charted a 24-year map of Daniel's movements. What stood out was that he had never once traveled within a 500-mile radius of Lansing, Michigan. He actively avoided airports equipped with advanced facial recognition, and his travel patterns revealed a deliberate strategy, steering clear of jurisdictions with robust missing persons programs. Forensic linguistic analysis software, Variant Systems X3, scrutinized 10,000 of Daniel's emails dating back to 2008. It flagged glaring inconsistencies in his purported backstory. He used Midwestern idioms, saying pop instead of soda, made cultural references inconsistent with someone raised in Mexico, and possessed an inexplicable knowledge of Michigan geography. In a 2014 email, he mentioned Vernors and the Mackinac Bridge, an extremely specific local reference. On April 22nd, the investigation took a dark turn. Facial recognition software identified another person in the background of Daniel's shared screen during a Zoom meeting on April 7th. The man was Richard Vaughn, a 63-year-old retired elementary school teacher living in San Diego. Records showed that Vaughn had worked as a substitute janitor at Willow Creek Elementary from June 1st to June 15th, 1995, covering for Timothy Mason, who was on vacation. This detail had been overlooked in the original investigation because Vaughn wasn't an official employee, just a temporary contractor paid in cash. An electronic surveillance warrant approved by Federal Judge Margaret Chen on April 23 under Section 215 of the Patriot Act authorized real-time monitoring of all digital communications for both Daniel and Vaughn. Within 72 hours, they intercepted 43 encrypted messages via Signal, discussing the Michigan problem and the need to keep the story straight. The case didn't end on the day he disappeared. It ended when technology finally caught up to 25 years of lies. On April 28, 2020, at 5:47 a.m., 18 FBI agents simultaneously surrounded 2 residences, Daniel Torres' apartment at 4223 Pacific Boulevard in San Diego and Richard Vaughn's house at 776 Sunset Drive, just 3.2 miles away. The operation, codenamed Reunion, was executed with surgical precision. There were no sirens, no televised drama, just professionals carrying out a job that had been 25 years in the making. Daniel Torres, now confirmed to be Christopher Brennan, was arrested in his sleep. He offered no resistance. When Agent Park read him his Miranda rights, Daniel responded with a single word: finally. On his nightstand, agents found a journal containing 1,947 pages written over 24 years, beginning with an entry from September 7, 1996. My name isn't Daniel. I'm 10 years old. I miss my mom. Richard Vaughn attempted to destroy evidence. Agents found him feeding documents into an industrial shredder. Using forensic reconstruction techniques, they recovered 16 boxes of partially destroyed materials. Among the documents were forged birth certificates, fabricated school records, and most disturbingly, photographs of 6 other children with notations of candidates dated between 1993 and 1995. Vaughn's interrogation, conducted by Special Agent Patricia Williams, ironically the same name as Christopher's fourth-grade teacher, began at 9 a.m. at the San Diego FBI field office. Advised by Public Defender Thomas Mitchell, Vaughn initially denied everything, but when presented with the decoded signal messages and the photographs from his home, his facade crumbled. "It wasn't supposed to go like this," Vaughn began at 11:43 a.m., according to the official transcript. "Christopher was special, brilliant, wasted on that working-class family. I could give him more." The confession, recorded in 4K video with redundant audio backup, lasted 7 hours and 23 minutes. Vaughn described the abduction with chilling detail. During his 2 weeks as a substitute janitor, he had studied the children, identifying those with both potential and vulnerabilities. Christopher had caught his eye because of his intelligence and his habit of walking home alone. Vaughn had gradually gained his trust, first by helping him with a math problem, then by giving him spare baseball cards from his collection. On June 12, 1995, Vaughn waited in his blue Chevrolet Astro van, license plate MI47X226, the partial plate Margaret Cooper had seen. He offered Christopher a ride to a special card shop that had a Mickey Mantle rookie card. "Kids always trust you when there's something specific they want," Vaughn explained with unnerving calm. It wasn't a violent abduction. He got in willingly. The original plan, according to Vaughn, was to raise Christopher properly. A lifelong bachelor with no children of his own, Vaughn saw himself as a superior father. He had spent months preparing, forging documents through a connection, Jonathan Marsh, a corrupt lawyer specializing in illegal adoptions, renting a house in Phoenix under the name Thomas Anderson, even enrolling Daniel in local baseball leagues to maintain a sense of normalcy. But Christopher was not the docile child Vaughn had expected. He cried for weeks, Vaughn admitted. He tried to escape 17 times in the first 3 months. I had to discipline him. That discipline, according to later medical evidence, included food deprivation, confinement in a soundproofed basement, and what Vaughn called re-education. Hours of indoctrination about his new life and the lies of his former family. The breaking point came on December 24, 1995. Christopher, then 10, tried to call home from a payphone at a mall. Vaughn caught him just after Christopher managed to say, "Mom," before the line went dead. Sara Brennan had received that call. For 25 years, she had wondered if it was real or just her desperate imagination. "After that, he gave up," Vaughn said. "He accepted being Daniel. It was easier than fighting." The forged school records painted Daniel Torres as a model student, albeit a withdrawn one. Teachers noted his brilliance, but also his strange sadness. A school counselor in 1998 wrote, "Daniel seems to carry an invisible weight. He refuses to speak about his life before the age of 10. The connection to other cases was the most disturbing revelation. The photographs of the 6 other children corresponded to unsolved cases. Tommy Mitchell, missing from Oakland, 1993. Rebecca Anderson, missing from Portland, 1994. Jose Ramirez, missing from Los Angeles, 1994. Amy Chen, missing from Seattle, 1995. Michael Johnson, missing from Sacramento, 1995. And Sarah Williams, missing from San Francisco, 1995. Vaughn denied abducting these children but admitted to being part of a network. We weren't pedophiles, he insisted, as if that made it better. We were collectors, saviors. These children had wasted potential. He provided 3 more names: Dr. Martin Hayes, a retired pediatrician in Oregon; Barbara Sullivan, a former social worker in Nevada; and James Morrison, a tech entrepreneur in Washington. All were arrested within the next 48 hours. Christopher's testimony on April 30th was gut-wrenching. With the help of emergency therapy and anti-anxiety medication, he was able to articulate 24 years of psychological captivity. "I knew who I was," he said, looking directly into the camera. "I never forgot. But after years of being told your family doesn't want you, that they didn't look hard enough, that you were a mistake in their lives, you start to believe that maybe Daniel is better than Christopher." Vaughn had been clever. He allowed Daniel to go to college, San Diego State, computer science, class of 2008, to get a job, to have a seemingly normal life, but always under surveillance. The monthly $3,000 payments weren't support, they were bribes. The Bitcoin was hush money. Vaughn held compromising videos of the early discipline, threatening to send them to employers if Daniel ever spoke out. "The pandemic changed everything," Daniel explained. "When everyone started working from home, Vaughn lost his daily control over me. For the first time in 24 years, I was truly alone. I started writing more in my journal. I started remembering more. I started to hope." The irony was lost on no one. A virus that separated the world had brought a family back together. Work from home would never feel the same for Marcus Henderson, who had unknowingly solved one of Michigan's oldest cold cases. By May 2nd, 2020, the remnants of the network were exposed. 14 arrests across 6 states, 23 missing children potentially identified, 4 of them found alive and living under false identities. The network had operated from 1991 until 1997, when the death of their forger, Jonathan Marsh, forced them to suspend operations. Vaughn had kept Christopher as his prize, his one perfectly created son. The truth was more disturbing than any conspiracy theory the internet had produced. It wasn't sex trafficking. It wasn't ritual murder. It wasn't for organ harvesting. It was something arguably worse. The complete theft of an identity, the murder of a child's soul while his body was kept alive. On November 15th, 2021, after 18 months of legal proceedings, Richard Vaughn was sentenced in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of California. Judge Roberto Guzman read the charges. 1 count of federal kidnapping, 1 count of transporting a minor across state lines with criminal intent, 6 counts of conspiracy to commit kidnapping, 3 counts of aggravated identity fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit money laundering. The sentence: 327 years without the possibility of parole, effectively multiple life sentences. The courtroom confrontation between Sara Brennan and Vaughn on sentencing day lasted 3 minutes and 17 seconds. Sara, now 69 and in a wheelchair from advanced Parkinson's, a condition accelerated by decades of stress, spoke with a clear voice. "You stole my baby. You stole 25 years. You stole a life, but you did not steal his spirit. My Christopher survived. You are the one who is dead inside." Vaughn, shackled in an orange prison jumpsuit, tried to respond but was silenced by his own lawyer. His last words on the court record were, "I just wanted to be a father." The courtroom erupted in disgusted murmurs. Michael Brennan, 5 years sober, stood beside his ex-wife. He did not speak, but his victim impact statement, read by the prosecutor, contained one line that resonated. "Every day for 9,131 days, I died a little. Now, knowing he's alive, I have to learn how to live again." On December 20th, 2021, the Brennan family held a symbolic funeral for the Christopher who never came back. It wasn't for the adult man who was alive and in intensive therapy, but for the 9-year-old boy who had effectively died on June 12, 1995. 300 people attended, including 47 of the original search volunteers. The small white casket contained Christopher's Power Rangers backpack, his baseball cards, and a photo of him smiling on his 9th birthday. Daniel Torres legally changed his name back to Christopher Michael Brennan in January of 2022, but he chose to continue using Daniel professionally. Christopher was a child, he explained in his only public interview with CNN. I am an adult shaped by two identities. I can't just erase 25 years even if I wanted to. The family reunification has been complicated. Christopher Daniel visits Sara weekly at her care facility, but she often doesn't recognize him, trapped in memory loops where he is still 9. Michael and Christopher have developed a cautious relationship, bound by shared grief but separated by a quarter-century of lost experiences. The case didn't end on the day he disappeared. It ended when, after 25 years of sepulchral silence, technology and chance finally converged on a Zoom screen, proving that sometimes, very, very rarely, ghosts do come home.